first of all, felicidades, Chris.
Yeah.
We're so happy to be starting here and to have been part of this historical event. I'm so stoked for you. So Danny's like texting me. He's like, I think we have to go get champagne. And I'm like taking out, I have like canned wine, canned Sauvignon Blanc. So cheers to everybody watching us. And, we're so happy, Danny and I, to be here for you and to be able to have this conversation that I think we've had like dreams of being able to talk about our journey into the Podcasting Hall of Fame, because each of us came from a place of not necessarily being your typical, what people now see as I'm going to say this word, even though it's a little not perfect, but like a professional podcaster as we see them out there in maybe with public media and all the fancy podcasts out there that come from a place of like journalism, right, Danny? Place where they go to school to get degrees. They've had lots of years behind the scenes doing audio engineering and all kinds of stuff like that. Like Danny and I, we don't do that.
No, at all.
We didn't start from there. No. So yeah. So what do you think? Where did we start? How did we start getting into this thing?
First of all, it's an honor to have you here, and hopefully we could do this in the future in person. Because this has been like a dream of mine to do something with you like this, because I think it is important to share our story to the world about how we started and everything. Because I've been seeing a lot of the podcasters that just started now recently, and they think, oh, I need the most expensive mic, I need mixer, I need all kinds of stuff, right, to start. And it wasn't like that for us back then. All those equipment was super expensive, and we just had to work with whatever we had at the moment, right? So this is like, I'm super excited that we're doing this together, Elsie, and hopefully we could do this again in person. We're gonna make it happen. We're definitely gonna
make it happen, and maybe we can bring our stuff. But anyway, I think that one of the things we talked about was like, all right, so give me the scoop here, Mr. Danny Peña.
Yes.
What was give us a little behind the scenes of you growing up, your family, and then kind of add a little bit like your relationship to technology, your relationship to the stuff, that your family might have had that could have possibly transitioned you to recording and creating content.
Yes, we'll go from there. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So for me, my dad is a DJ. So I was always messing around with his equipment, with the turntables, cassette player, mics, because he's always DJing, doing parties, house parties with our family and friends, right? So I was always messing around with that for a while. Sometimes I'll get in trouble because I was just stuck experimenting with his equipment all the time, right? So then it was during, like, when I became a gamer, it was my grandmother bought me an Atari 2600 in the early 80s. But in the early 90s, I was really into hip hop, and I was promoting a lot in the streets. And I had a lot of friends that they were DJing at different radio stations. But in Miami, they had a lot of pirate stations. When I say pirate radio stations, those were like not approved by the FCC.
Right.
But we were doing it. People were listening. They would call in. So I would do that with my cousins for a while. And I was like, man, this is super cool. I'm broadcasting locally in Miami, and everybody's listening from school, from college, and I did that for a while. Then it was like in the late 90s. I was still experimenting with VCRs and cassette players, editing like that, right? Because I just didn't have a computer at that time. But around the late 90s, I went to my friend's house. He had a computer, and he was watching a hip hop show online through Real Player on a 56K modem, super slow, right? So there was this company called Pseudo that company had multiple different shows for music, talk shows, news, everything. So there was one show that I would watch weekly called 88 Hip Hop. This was in 1998.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, they're broadcasting worldwide. I want to do this. I want to do this so bad, right? So I tried to do this with a couple of my friends because we had a newspaper locally in Miami called The Cipher, and it was free. And I was like, hey, let's take it to the next level. Let's have our own radio show online where people could listen to it. And we tried, Elsie, and it was so expensive at that time that we couldn't do it, right? Okay. So fast forward to 2001, I got into this game that's an RPG game, and I played with friends online. We do quests together, and I became a huge fan of that game. And I said to myself, I'm going to do a show about this game only for my community. I wasn't trying to, like you said, journalists or anything like that. I just did it because of my fans, my friends. And I did that, and it became a hit. The first check that I received was I uploaded my show through mp3.com, and that website was for music artists. So every time someone was listening to a song or track from your favorite artist on mp3.com, they get paid royalties, right? So people were listening to my show through that website, and I got paid. So the first check I received during that time was $500. And that's when I was like, okay, this is a game changer. I want to start a business from this. I got super inspired. So then 2005, that's when I launched officially Gamertag Radio. And from there, the rest is history. But before all that, it was hard for me to get a computer because I asked my mom, I asked my dad to see if they could help me out. And us growing up as Latinos, we don't have the budget for all this type of equipment back then. My mom and my dad were like, look, we have enough money to pay the bills and get our food. That's it. When I went to college, I had to get loan from school for me in order to buy an official computer. And that's how I got my first PC.
Wow.
You know, it was really hard for me, you know, and I went from there, man. You know, I didn't have no mics. I was using tape recorder. And that's how I did everything for me, you know, back then. How about you, Elsie? How was it for you? Like, was there something that inspired you at that time that you decided to podcast during that time, or what?
Well, I didn't have the long-standing desire to be heard all over the world for a long time in terms of audio, you know. And I think one of the reasons that I started is because I got an iPod. And so I decided to listen in, and there were these podcast things. Now, speaking about technology, I also didn't own like a computer till I was in my, I think, late 20s, early 30s. That was the first time I bought myself a computer. Because like you, we didn't really have the budget for a computer. And we did not have technology at home very much. I told you, we had an Intellivision in the early 80s. That was about the extent of my parents like helping their children have something to play with at home. My dad got a computer, I think, in the late 80s is when he got a computer at home because he was an architect and he needed to learn AutoCAD. So then all of a sudden he needed to have that, but that was his work computer. So I never sat in there. Nobody said, hey, you want to learn this? Like none of that stuff. In college, I also just went to the computer to write my papers right inside of the computer area there, but I never had my own. So having to figure out how to even consider, like when I got my iPod, I didn't have any digital music. I only had CDs, and I didn't know what to put in it. I didn't know what to put in the iPod. And so when I opened up iTunes, there were podcasts there, and I started to listen to podcasts, and I thought, oh, I want to do that. So not because of the famous ones like, This American Life and all of those public radio shows that were in there, but because I found podcasts by like everyday people doing this thing. So I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I started to do it with an iRiver, which I wish I could still have because it's a little tiny. It was like a little tiny thing. It was about this big, and it happened to have like really great ways to get audio. And I would attach it to my arm, and I had a $30 Sony lavalier microphone that you could still get. You could still find it. It's like the ECM something or other. It was like one of those lav microphones that you use for recording meetings at work, I guess. I don't know why anybody would want to record meetings at work, but whatever. Yeah. And so then like, that's what I used to use. And I used to like change it into my computer. It was a PC at that time. And I had to learn how to do apps. I had to learn about drivers. I had to learn about like uncompatibility, like this isn't compatible, what kind of an audio file it was. And I had to like essentially break up with my iRiver because I got a new computer, which is a Mac, and the drivers didn't align. But now one last story about that. The computer that I bought it via HSN. So I got my computer on HSN, and the only reason I bought it in HSN is because they had payment plans, and I was able to like pull the plug, and they totally got me. Like I didn't have the money for that computer, but I knew that I needed this computer, and that's the first time that I ever I guess that's the first time I ever invested in any kind of technology that came my way that was like expensive for me, you know? And look at me now with like iPad Pros and like all kinds of MacBooks.
Yeah. And the one thing too, I would have to mention that we had to, I don't know about you, Elsie, but for me, I had to learn how to manually change my RSS feed when I first started with gaming, with everything, because I felt like I didn't want to wait people to find me. I had to go and find them. And it worked out for me, you know? So, but when I forgot to mention too, like there was content that I created back in the days that the media picked it up from the gaming world. So I remember the first time a major media outlet picked up one of my shows, and this is in 2001. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. They put my name, they put the name of the show, they talked about like what the topics that we had on our show and everything. I was super impressed. I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. And it just went around. And I think the power of just word of mouth helped me out so much during that time. How about you?
Yeah, it was really interesting is that you're talking about all the stuff. And I never really thought that we had that in common. Like when I first started my podcast, which was not I literally started my podcast because I wanted to create another podcast. I thought I was going to create the podcast that I wanted after I learned how to podcast. And so I thought, I'll just start recording my yoga classes because that's what I'm doing and I'm using my voice. And I thought I'm just going to use this as a tool. It was like a practice. That's how I thought. So, but I started to record those classes and people wanted to listen to them. Right. But I did tell them that it was a podcast because my podcast wasn't a show. Right. It was like my class. So then people would go, what are you doing? Because I had the thing around my arm and I'd go, I'm recording my podcast. And they would go, what is a podcast? And I realized that me having to describe this every single time was going to be a pain in my behind. So I created cards that I would drop at the yoga studios. And then when my students would come up to me, I'd go like, this is my card. And it was a postcard. And in the back, it told them exactly how to get it, what it was, why. And it's from the get-go, I was like, this is why you need this. This is how you get it. It's a yoga class that you can take with you anywhere and you can listen to it at your own time. Like I would describe all that stuff. So what was crazy is that I built my community in the same way you did with the people. Like the people, I knew they were I knew the people that were listening. So they would email me and they would say, hey, this is, Maria, and I've been listening to your show. And that was a really great class and this and that. And I knew who that person was. And I would meet people all the time. Like I told you that I had been in 3 separate states walking around and I was just talking, with whoever I was with. And people would go, are you Elsie from Elsie's yoga class? And I was like, this is so bizarre that you recognize my voice.
It feels weird. It feels weird, but like at the end of the day, Elsie, you don't know who's listening. You don't know who's following you. And there's people that will listen and not saying anything.
That's right.
Not say anything. They're
Until
just keep it quiet.
2-3 years later, and they're like, I've been listening to you since you started. It's nuts. And when you were talking about being covered by the media, I had the same thing happen with me when I was in LA and I was teaching my classes. One of the LA stations covered my class. And so I had I had to teach my class and I had all of the news in the back of the room, like with their thing and like doing close-ups. And I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. This is bizarre.
It is.
And
weird.
then they interviewed me for like half an hour. He's like, open up your computer, do the podcasting thing. And I was like,
What? Okay.
Okay, what do I do? You know what I mean? I just opened up, I think, GarageBand or something, and I started to pretend like I was editing. I mean, how do you do I mean, what?
What is the podcast thing? What is that?
I don't even know. So, but the crazy part is that I was so excited, right? So, I mean, you have to remember, it's like an hour of yoga, 30 minutes of him talking with me, like full on interview, like with the cameras and the whole thing. And then I'm like, oh my God, so exciting. It comes on, and I think it was like a 3-minute spot. And I don't know, 30 seconds. And I'm like, talk about editing.
Yeah. But you know what? You know what's crazy for me? This is the second time that I was featured also on a media outlet, but this time was the first time for GTR, for Gamer Tag Radio. So what happened was I found out that a friend of mine went to an event that was MTV and Xbox. They were going to reveal the new console, but it was going to air on MTV. It was recorded on a Thursday, then it was going to air on MTV a week later. So I hit them up Friday the next day. I was like, hey, can you come on the show and let's talk about your experience? And like, yeah, sure. So I recorded it, and they revealed everything. I was like, oh, this is great content, right? So I posted that on our website. It was up for only literally 30 minutes. I get an email from Microsoft, and they said, Danny, you have to remove this, because we were going to save that for the MTV show. So MTV told my friends to spread the word about it, right? But Microsoft wanted this to be top secret until it aired on TV.
Oh my gosh.
So I had no idea. I was nervous. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, people are going to get in trouble. I had no idea about NDA, nothing. I was just freaking out the whole time, right? So I took it off from our website, but it was already all over the place. All the major media outlets in gaming picked it up, and they were also hosting that same audio that I removed from one website, and it was already out. So people knew everything because of our show right before MTV aired it.
Wow.
It was already out there, but that was like the major big push for us, like even more new listeners because of that, but I had no idea. I just recorded because my friends attended. I'm like, I just want to get your experience, and that's it. And that's the thing, that the reason why I mention this is because a lot of the podcasters, new podcasters, especially nowadays too, they think by clickbait, they will get downloads. I just did it because I just love gaming.
Right.
Love talking to my friends. And I did that. I had no idea that was going to be all over the place. At that time, there was no social media. There was message boards. It was forums. Our audio was all over the different message boards, all over the media outlets, everything. And it was just a community spreading the word, So I always mention this, Elsie. Back in the 80s, when people used to play Nintendo, they would grab the cartridge and they'll blow it.
I remember doing that. And I didn't even, with the cartridges. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and they're putting into the system. So my question to you is, how in the world you find out about that? There was no social media back then. It was the community spreading the word about that. And you figure it out. And you're not even a hardcore gamer. You're just a casual gamer. You know what I'm saying? So the reason why I'm saying that is because that's how you promote your content, your podcast, is because of the community. The community is going to spread the word. It's not about spamming on Twitter, on Facebook. It's the community engagement. That's the key that a lot of people are missing out. And it worked out for us in the early days where there was no smartphones, no social media, and how the media picked you up back in the days is word of mouth. It was word of mouth. And I think we need to push that more in our community, especially in podcasting,
But you know what I've seen lately too with a lot of the community is that, or at least what I see people is that they like so hearing from the community, how do people get in contact with you? I think that people are like, oh, I have to get my artwork all right. I have to get my RSS feeds set up. I have to get the podcast description. Who's my audience? I'm going to have to figure out who that is. But, and then they launch and they do the thing and they don't have any way for them to contact you. Like there's no where's the phone number? Because we used to all have phone numbers. We used to use all kinds of different ways for people to leave audio feedback for us. We told them what our email address was. We tell them where to connect with us. And it's not about connect with me on social and then you don't engage with them. I have, you know what? I still have an Elsie's yoga class Twitter list on my Twitter account that I started to build when as soon as Twitter list became available. I still have it in there, and I look at those people and I go, oh my gosh,
wow,
they've been following me for over a decade.
It's
amazing.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I just remembered that I did that.
Yeah, you know what, for me, there's people that know me and they know the type of content I've been releasing for 15 years, and I've never met them. One of my co-hosts went to CES in Las Vegas this year, pre-COVID. And he went to a meeting for a company, and there was this guy that worked for that company. He was like, oh, yeah, Gamer Tech Radio. Oh, how's Danny? How's he doing? And my co-host was like, oh, you know him? And he asked me that, and I'm like, I don't even know who that is. Who's this person? Again, word of mouth. So now, Elsie, one thing I want to talk about is us going to like conferences, right?
That's
so for
right.
me,
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, it's super important to mention this story. So for me, in 2005, I went to E3, which is the biggest, largest video game conference in the world, and it's in LA. I'd never been to LA. I'd never attended there. I had to get passes through a friend, and I went there with my brother, and I wasted all my money on flights, on hotels, everything, right? But I went to Kinko's and I print out a media kit. So I copy the best interviews that I had on our show during that time. And I put everything on the CD. And I had flyers. I had a bio, pictures of us. It was super unprofessional, but whatever. It was good, right? So I did that, and I took all of it. I had like over 100 of those. And I went to E3 and I passed it out to every single company at that time. And they looked at me crazy and they're like, what is a podcast? How many downloads? How many listens do you get at that time? And I told them, oh, it was 500. Like it was something, I don't know. I gave them a random number.
Yeah.
And they looked at me like, okay, but they never contacted me. They never gave me an opportunity. I left that event so like down. I felt like I wasted all my money and I wasted my time in 2005. Right. And I only had, and I mentioned this a lot at conferences, I only had $20 for the whole week with my brother. I had to go and get dollar burgers, chicken nuggets for that whole week, right? Because I wasted all my money. So imagine hearing that news of people like, yeah, I don't want to work with you. They wouldn't even bother emailing or anything like that, right? So 2 months later, iTunes added podcasts to their platform, right? Everybody calling me a year later. Everybody calling me. But the reason why I'm mentioning this, it was because if I didn't go to that event and take that risk in 2005, I would have not gained no emails, no contact from different companies. Everybody want to be like, oh, let me start getting content creators, podcasters at that time. Now everybody want to work with us. Sometimes it was just too much in 2006 for me, but it was that moment. And I think I did the right thing and I took that risk, So for you?
No, I do the same. I did the same kind of stuff. Mind you, I was scrappily not having money as well, right? Because I was trying to do the acting thing in Los Angeles at the time. And I was waiting tables all day, every day. And there was no extra money I had to pay my rent, right? So part of when I got into podcasting, one of the things that I used to do, because social media really started to connect me with other people, is I just was very strategic at following people. But then I started to see that there were these events that were happening around town. And whenever there was an event that happened around town, particularly around tech or connection or like, meetups and things like that, I put it in my calendar, and I didn't have a car in LA. So I would take public transportation to go to all of these different places. Like that was my staple. So the number one place that I went first to make the big connection, shout out to LA podcasters, because I met LA podcasters at that time and I just happened to find them. I don't even know how I found who they were at that time. And I was binge listening to all of the people who were part of the group, right? So it's not like they were part of the group. I subscribed to all their shows, and I would take a bus to downtown LA, which is where the meetups were. And I didn't buy myself anything. I didn't buy myself a drink. I didn't buy myself food. I didn't have any money to pay for that. But I would just show up and like hang out, you know, and like just meet people and be there. And then I would take a bus back. It would take me an hour to get back home from downtown LA at that time, right? And so I started to meet people there. But then I also found out about the Portable New Media Expo, which was happening right around that time as well. Like I would say, I don't even know what the date would be, 2006, I think, is when the first one that happened.
Okay.
And this was in, not San Diego. It was in, oh my God, I forgot. It wasn't in San Diego. It was in Southern California. It was somewhere where I had to take a train. So let's put it that way. I had to make, to budget to be able to buy a train ticket, which was like, it ended up being a few, Ontario. It was Ontario, California. So it was like, I think an hour and a half to 2 hours away using the train again. So I had to take public transportation, like a bus, to downtown LA. From downtown LA, I transferred into the Metrolink, which actually took me all the way to Ontario. And at Ontario, I would show up for the conference and all I would do is walk around. Like I didn't buy a ticket. I couldn't afford a ticket. So I would just be there walking around. And I remember the first time that I walked in there, because I essentially was like the only woman, let alone a woman who had a yoga class. So then I walked in and people recognized me. And I remember the LA podcasters had a booth, right? And they had a booth and they had like the microphones and everybody was talking with each other. And I walked by and then somebody, I don't know, I can't really give exact who it was. They were like, "Oh, Elsie, come on back and be part of the panel. We have a women in podcasting panel that you could be a part of." And I was like, okay. I just started my podcast like 3 months ago. So, okay, I'll be part of a panel. And that was like my first panel that I felt so famous. Like I felt like I was so famous. And I also was really not intimidated, but I don't think I've ever felt as starstruck as going to that event, because there were so many people in there that I had been listening to for at least 6 months that were part of my daily life. And I was like, oh my God, so-and-so is here.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've never seen them.
That is crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what I did. I would take a bus and then I would come back home and I didn't even eat. I mean, I had no money.
Yeah. No, but it's good. It's good to talk about that, Elsie, because it looks like everybody thinks, oh man, Elsie is doing good. Danny's doing good. Yeah. But let me tell you, it was a struggle back then for us. It was a struggle. Look, I started recording on cassette players. I started editing through cassette players. Now, when I upgraded and I had a computer, a laptop, I had to use my built-in mic from the computer. That's right. If I wanted to do a roundtable discussion with my committee members, I will go in the game, Halo 2. I'll get 16 people in total there. Oh my God. I'll record it through video and then convert that into audio, but the quality was so bad. There was no Skype at that time.
Right.
At all. Or I will get like an actual phone, put it on speaker, and put the phone close to the built-in mic, and I'm talking to the person like that.
Right.
Pre-Skype. So I want to mention this. Yes, it wasn't the greatest audio back then. It wasn't the greatest, right? But guess what? Our community stayed with us, listen to us, share our content. It wasn't because of the equipment that we had back then. It was because of the content, the community engagement, us talking to our listeners, doing something different that was at that time that nobody has seen or heard before. And we kept on doing it. You know, I still remember the first time I got an ad on my podcast, and it was because Rob through Lipson hit me up. He actually called me because he saw our numbers at that time. He's like, "Hey, Danny, we were like the U.S. Navy want to advertise on
my
our
gosh,
show."
I remember that campaign because I was already at Lipson at that time.
Yeah,
oh my God.
And he's like, "You would like to get this ad?" I was like, yeah, I'll do it for 3 months." Mind blown. This was in 2006, where at that time, ads, that wasn't even a thing back then. So I did that. And I remember at around 2006, a lot of the podcasters in gaming got mad and called us sellouts because now we're getting money. Now we're getting support from all the companies. Now we're sellouts. But now you guys are too mainstream now. This is in 2006. What do you mean mainstream? What? So it's crazy how people during that time will say, "Oh, no, I don't do ads. I don't do ads on my show." How in the world would you upgrade your equipment and start traveling and start doing all these things? I had to pay for a hotel with my own money. I was happy to get paid from an advertisement for the first time. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. So you have any stories like that for you?
Yeah, no, the first ad that I had was for a yoga mat, and it was perfect for my audience, which was cool. Right.
Yeah,
but when it came to I didn't really take ads because of the content of my class. So it's like, you're trying to relax people. You're trying to, you're teaching a class, and you can't just have an ad in that. It's a class. But anyway,
it doesn't fit. Yeah, I get it.
The quality of the content. I have to say, I just checked numbers just because I happened to be in Lipson and I wanted to see what's going on with Elsie's yoga class. I still get about anywhere from 80 to 150 downloads per day for that. And I don't do anything for that. I've stopped producing Elsie. I stopped in 2013. That's the last episode that I published on that feed. And so you can actually hear the progression of my audio from super crappy to kind of crappy the entire time. And it's I also so I up leveled too. First it was just that lavalier mic, and I thought, well, I need to have a microphone for my computer. And I was told, get this mic, and I got a Heil PR20. But what I found out, and this is what sucks, is that I had this beautiful microphone. It was pink. It's a pink microphone. I don't know where it is. I'm very sad about that. And I had to figure out, I didn't know how to connect the mic to the computer. Nobody told me that there was another piece to the puzzle there. So I had to sit there and figure out, how am I going to get this thing? I don't want to buy a mixer. And then I bought the iMic, which was a tiny little device that you would stick into it. And somehow I don't even know how I did it, but I connected to it. But my audio was really bad because the Heil PR20 has no phantom power, or it had very little gain. So it sounded really low and I couldn't get it to record high. And then when I made that sound really high, then my other recording was too low. And it's just a horrific experience to be listening to the classes. Yeah. But why? But to your point, people are downloading my classes still, and they don't sound fancy. They sound bad. But
your listeners, your community appreciate that so much.
Right.
I sometimes I go back and listen to our conversation that we had from past episodes. I'm like, man, I can't believe people actually listen to this. But you know what? It's a great conversation. Listen to it now, So, so what we do now on our show, we have an old school episode. So I'll get an interview or something from 15 years ago or even more, because I even have content from 20 years ago.
Oh my gosh,
almost 20.
Where do you have this? Sorry to diverge, but where do you have these things?
I have everything cassette or audio files, so I still have them saved up
in your computer somewhere, or in a hard drive. Hard drive. Okay. Yeah. So I'll do that and I'll play it. I played one audio from 19 years ago that I had from I went to the first event on Xbox and GameCube, Nintendo, and I actually posted the interviews that I recorded at that time, and everybody's like, wow, I can't believe kids that weren't even alive during that time. They were amazed.
You're like, wow, this is so cool. But
They
it's
weren't even alive. Great.
but you know why I do that? It's part of history, and I want to show how was gaming during that time to our listeners, especially the young listeners nowadays. You know, so that's why I do that. You know, but Elsie, I know we almost running out of time, but
yeah.
Now let's fast forward. You know, you start working at Libsyn. For me, fast forward, we signed a deal with CBS Radio. We were there for a couple of years, and now with another podcast network now. But now we're getting income. Our show's getting big. I know you started doing your conference and everything, right? For C Podcast. But the moment that we found out that we were going to get inducted to the Podcast Hall of Fame.
Oh, dude.
Let me tell you, for me, I remember going to local meetups in Miami because I wanted to meet other podcasters, right? So I went and I got to meet Jared from Podcast Movement. I met a bunch of other people, you know, different podcasters locally, right? And I told them my story. You know, they were like, "What are you doing here?
Right.
You're a pro. Why we're beginners, like we're newbies. Why are you here?" I'm like, "Nah, the reason why I came because I love meeting podcasters. I don't care if you're big or small. I'm not one of those, oh, this person has 1 million downloads, let me just hang out with him. No, I'm not that type of person at all. So I share my story. And then months later, literally all this happened in one day. Our show was on the front page of iTunes, right next to Serial. I don't know what I just sent them a request. Hey, we're turning 10 years old at that time.
Yeah.
Can you put it on the front page? I just sent that request to Apple. I had no idea they were going to do it.
They listened to you. They
listened to me, and they gave me the opportunity, right? Then,
the power.
Then I get a call from CBS Radio. Danny, we would like to talk to you guys. We'd like to sign you on our network. I was like, oh my God. And then minutes after that, I get an email. Danny, you're going to get inducted to the Podcast Hall of Fame. I was like this. What in the world's going on, yo? Right? All this at the same time, right? So now fast forward, I'm up behind the stage.
Right.
Yeah, I was there, and I hear Colt Cabana. He was hosting the awards, right? I wasn't nervous. I was more like I was just proud at that moment, right? And then he started reading the script about my story. I was crying in backstage, yo. crying. I'm there holding it, and then he calls me Danny Pena, and I go to a stage, right? But one thing I forgot to mention, I invited my community to go with me to the awards. We went to the awards together, red carpet, sat on the front row. I had the whole row of all my listeners from Dallas, and I've never met them, but it felt like I know them.
Like, yeah.
You know? So I go on stage, and I'm there I had this whole list of people I was going to mention. I had your name. I had Rob. I had everybody from Libsyn. I skipped everybody because I was just I was trying to hold my tears the whole time.
Yeah.
And at the end, I dedicated my award to a friend of mine that she was the one that contacted us the day after we released our first episode. She works at Xbox, and she interviewed us, and she put us on the front page of Xbox.com. And when you turn on the system, you'll see on the dashboard of the system, the console, we have an interview with Gamertag Radio. Millions of people got to see that in 2005, you know, and she was the reason that helped us out to get the word out even more. And at that time, she was battling with breast cancer. Yeah. And I just broke down and I cried, and everybody to this day, they were saying, Danny, that was like the most emotional moment out of all the years of the awards, because it wasn't fake. Like it came from the heart, you know?
Right.
And yeah, I thank my dad. I thank everybody. And that was a really cool moment, you know? But when I heard that you were get inducted, Elsie, I was so proud of you, man, because we need more people of color, because we don't get a lot of these opportunities, man. Not a lot of us. We have to work twice, 3 times, even 10 times harder to get any type of opportunity in any industry. And I was proud to see that you were the first Latina to get inducted. I'm the first Latino to get inducted. I was so proud of that moment for us, man. So how about you? I'll say, oh, by the way, when you had your speech, I was in the front row going, yeah, Elsie, the whole time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think we're running out of time here.
Yeah,
but,
go for it.
Bringing it back home, I think one of the things that, I mean, just to finish this off, one of the key things that I want, I guess, people to listen to about this, when you were talking about people of color and making sure that we get these awards and whatnot, part of it is that we didn't have any training. And I want to bring that into play here, that we worked our butts off to really get our hands into this industry and to understand it inside and out, and to really connect with our listeners, and to really dive into our own, like, why we want to podcast and why we want to do these things. And you don't really need anybody else to tell you that you need this education, that you need this kind of training, that you need this kind of other thing. You pick it up, but you do what you got to do. And it's like I am so proud of being inducted into this Hall of Fame for being in an industry that was at its inception. I've gotten a chance to grow with it and to expand with it, and to be so good at being able to know so many verticals of the industry that I just, by being in it versus learning about it, right? I was in it versus coming to it from another industry. So anyway.
Yeah, it was a very cool moment seeing you on stage. And one thing that stood out to me, you mentioned right there on stage, we're like, shout out to all my Latinos and Latinas.
Yeah, because it's like, yeah.
When I go to Dominican Republic, and I did my first speaking engagement over there, and one of the first things I mentioned, because I feel like in Dominican Republic, they feel left out in the islands outside of the United States, right? So I mentioned this. I go, look, first Latino, first Dominican, first everything. I showed people all the opportunity that happened to me throughout all these years. And when I was done, there was this young lady came up to me crying and nervous to talk to me. And she said, I'm just so inspired with your presentation that I would love for you to talk to other groups that we have in our university. We never had this opportunity. Will you do it? I'm like, hell yeah. So there was a whole line of people that have never heard of me. Yep. After I did my presentation, there was a long line of people that just want to take pictures and ask questions about podcasting. And, we need, when you get out, I know we're going to wrap this up, Neil. When we have these opportunities, let's go for it and let's help our people. Let's give back. It's not about us all the time. Let's give back. I've been helping people since I started my show, since I started doing all this. And the reason is, when the doors open for other people, the opportunity is going to be bigger for everybody. It's not about competition, Elsie. Yep. You helped me a lot back in the days. I helped you. We're fam. We have to do this more often, So
for sure.
Just want to end it with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. You guys are amazing. I just wanted to hop in. I didn't even want to interrupt you because I've been listening so close. Elsie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was sitting here thinking we did not have the honor of having you at the very first Cinema Voz, but there's no way we'll be able to pull it off without you this time.
We got to do a live one. We got to do a live one together.
Yeah.
We do.
And Danny, man, thank you for you guys' amazing stories. I just wanted to just jump in for a second. We didn't have a lot of questions right now, just people saying that the stories are amazing. I want to say hi to Carlos Cintron, who just jumped in to tell you guys that these were amazing and inspiring stories. John Garcia, are you back?
Chicos, gracias.
Okay.
Muchas gracias.
Hola, John.
Saludos todos los que están viendo aquí también.
Elsie, Dani, muchas gracias. Qué bueno tenerlos. Dani, ¿qué estás tomando?
No sé lo que es esto, pero mira,
¿Cómo que no sabes?
No sé lo que es.
Es como cerveza local de aquí de Nueva York.
Mira, se rompió el
Oberón.
No, cerveza local no, Dani.
No,
Dani,
me gusta
gracias.
eso.
Mira,
Interesante.
para la gente de nuestra gente que están mirando de otros países, tenemos muchos. John, solamente quería decir a todos, mira, se seteó el récord y ustedes son los primeros dos que hablaron después del récord. So, es algo muy especial, se hizo la historia. John, yo le estaba diciendo a Elsie antes de terminar aquí que no tuvimos el honor de tenerla en Cinema Voz 1, pero esto se tiene que repetir ahí en Cinema Voz.
Totalmente. Sí, Elsie, sí, hicimos historia con esta apertura de Cinema Voz virtual o Global Podfest. tenemos que hacerlo presencialmente cuando todo esto, queriendo Dios, pase, ¿no?
Yeah. Sí, claro. Por supuesto. Ahí estoy.
Ahí estoy.
You guys are amazing. Listen, I just want to thank you guys personally again for setting history, being the kickoff for Cinema Voz Virtual. We're so honored to be part of the Podfest Global Summit. Elsie, thank you for all of your support. Danny, you know I love you, brother. Thank you for
I love you too, man. And Elsie, I love you too. And Joan, everybody, I love you all.
We're going to sign off.
Chris too.
And we'll be back in a few minutes with Genaro